Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a time when the air wasn't filled with the silent hum of electric vehicles, but with the thunderous roar of V8 engines. Picture a decade painted in bold colors where freedom wasn't just a concept, but something you could feel with your hands on the wheel and your foot on the gas. This was the 1970s, the undisputed golden age of the American muscle car. It was an era of rebellion, of pushing limits, and of raw, unapologetic power. The streets were a symphony of rumbling exhausts, the nights were lit by the neon glow of diners and drive-ins, and the open highway was a call to adventure. This wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about the journey, the experience, the statement you made when you arrived. And at the heart of this automotive revolution was a car that was more than just metal, glass, and rubber. It was a legend forged in fire and steel, a cultural icon that captured the very spirit of the age. I'm talking, of course, about the Pontiac Firebird. The Firebird wasn't just a car, it was a promise. A promise of speed, of style, and of a kind of untamed spirit that resonated with a generation hungry for excitement. Its story begins in the late 1960s, as Pontiac, a division of General Motors known for its performance-oriented image, watched the pony car market explode. Ford had struck gold with the Mustang, and Chevrolet was hot on its heels with the Camaro. Pontiac needed its own contender, a car that could not only compete but also carve out its own unique identity. They didn't just want to build another pony car. They wanted to build a Pontiac. That meant it had to have more than just a powerful engine. It needed flair, a touch of luxury, and an attitude all its own. In 1967, the first Firebird rolled off the line, sharing its F-body platform with the Camaro, but it was distinctly Pontiac. With its integrated bumper, Coke bottle styling, and that iconic split grille, it looked like it was ready to pounce even when standing still. But it was the dawn of the 1970s that saw the Firebird truly come into its own and become the stuff of legend. The second-generation Firebird, introduced in 1970, was a radical departure. It was lower, wider, and more aerodynamic, with a sleek, European-inspired design that made everything else on the road look instantly dated. This wasn't just an evolution. It was a complete reinvention. The designers at Pontiac, led by visionaries like Bill Mitchell and John Scannella throughout the rulebook, they created a car that was pure automotive art. The long hood, the short rear deck, the muscular fender flares, and that aggressive, pointed front end, it all screamed performance. The car looked fast, it felt fast, and boy was it fast. Under that long hood you could find a range of potent V8 engines. But the name that truly set hearts racing was Trans Am. The Trans Am performance and appearance package transformed the Firebird from a stylish cruiser into a bona fide supercar for the streets. It featured a more powerful engine, upgraded suspension, wider tires, and of course, its signature aerodynamic spoilers and air extractors. The early 70s Trans Am was a beast. Think about the 1970 model with the Ram Air 400 cubic inch engine. This wasn't just a car, it was a weapon. It was a declaration to the world that Pontiac was serious about performance. The sound it made was a deep, guttural growl that could make the pavement tremble and send shivers down your spine. Driving one wasn't just a commute, it was an event. It was a visceral, all-encompassing experience that connected the driver to the road in a way that few cars have managed since. But the 1970s were a turbulent time for the American auto industry. The oil crisis of 1973 hit like a bombshell. Gas prices skyrocketed, and suddenly fuel efficiency became a national priority. New emissions regulations began to choke the life out of the big V8 South that had defined the muscle car era. For many, it seemed like the party was over. Detroit's giants started downsizing engines and detuning their performance models. The roar of the muscle car was slowly being muffled. Many of its rivals either faded into obscurity or became pale imitations of their former selves. The Mustang, for instance, was temporarily reinvented as a small, economy-focused car. It seemed like the golden age was coming to an abrupt and disappointing end, but not for the Firebird. While other manufacturers backed away from performance, Pontiac doubled down. They fought tooth and nail to keep the spirit of the muscle car alive. They saw the changing landscape not as an end, but as a challenge. How could they keep the Firebird exciting and powerful while navigating this new world of regulations and fuel consciousness? Their answer was engineering ingenuity and a whole lot of attitude. Take the Super Duty 455 engine of 1973 and 1974. At a time when other companies were killing their big block engines, Pontiac introduced one of the last true high-performance V8 south of the era. The SD455 was a hand-built, race-bred engine that somehow managed to meet the new emission standards without sacrificing its soul. It was a marvel of engineering, a final defiant roar from the golden age. Cars equipped with this engine are now among the most collectible and sought-after muscle cars of all time. As the decade wore on, the focus shifted slightly from pure, straight-line horsepower to balanced performance and iconic style. And this is where the Firebird truly cemented its place in pop culture history. In 1977, a movie came out that would change everything. Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters, starring Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, and a black and gold 1977 Pontiac Trans Am Special Edition. That car wasn't just a prop. It was a co-star. With its black paint, gold pinstriping, snowflake wheels, and that massive, unforgettable, screaming chicken hood decal, the Trans Am became an instant superstar. Suddenly, everyone wanted a black Trans Am. The movie perfectly captured the rebellious, fun-loving spirit of the car. It was fast, it was audacious, and it looked incredible on screen. The Bandit Trans Am became the dream car for a generation. Sales exploded. Pontiac couldn't build them fast enough. The Firebird wasn't just a muscle car anymore. It was the ultimate symbol of cool. It represented freedom, a charming defiance of authority, and the thrill of the open road. The Firebird's success in the late 70s proved that the American appetite for exciting cars hadn't disappeared. It had just evolved. People still craved a car that made them feel something, a car with personality and presence. And the Firebird delivered in spades. The T-top roof option, which allowed you to remove 2 glass panels for an open-air experience, only added to its appeal. You could have the wind in your hair and the rumble of a V8 at your command. It was the best of both worlds. Looking back, the 1970s Firebird is a story of survival and triumph. It was born at the peak of the muscle car era, and it not only survived the industry's toughest challenges but thrived, becoming more popular and more iconic than ever before. It was a bridge between the raw power of the 60s and the stylized performance of the 80s. It was more than just a car. It was a rolling piece of art, a symbol of rebellion, and a movie star. It was the last of the old guard, a car that kept the flame of American muscle burning brightly through a dark and uncertain time. The roar of its engine was the soundtrack of an era, a sound that, for many of us, will forever represent the spirit of freedom on the American highway. Thanks for joining me on this trip down memory lane. This is just the beginning of our journey into the world of legendary cars. If you enjoyed this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We've got a lot more ground to cover. Until next time, keep the passion for driving alive. Welcome back to our series on the icons of American muscle. Today, we're diving deep into the story behind one of the most evocative names in automotive history. This is Chapter 2, From the Ashes of the Phoenix. Have you ever wondered where the name Firebird came from? It's more than just a cool name slapped on a car. It's a story of myth, rebirth, and pure, unadulterated power. To understand the Firebird, you have to understand the legend that inspired it, the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a mythical bird, a creature of stunning beauty, wrapped in flames of red and gold. It lives for centuries, and when its time comes, it doesn't just die. It builds a nest of aromatic spices, sets it ablaze, and is consumed by the flames. But that's not the end. From those very ashes, a new young phoenix arises, stronger and more vibrant than before. It's the ultimate symbol of immortality, resurrection, and an unbreakable spirit. Now, let's rewind to the mid-1960s. The world was changing at a breakneck pace. Culture was exploding, music was getting louder, and on the streets, a new kind of war was being waged, the horsepower war. The pony car craze, kicked off by the Ford Mustang, was in full swing. Every manufacturer was scrambling to get a piece of the action, to capture the hearts and wallets of a generation craving speed, style, and freedom. General Motors was no exception. Chevrolet had its answer with the Camaro. But what about Pontiac? Pontiac, known for its performance-oriented image, couldn't be left behind. They needed their own contender, something that could go head-to-head with the Mustang and its own corporate cousin, the Camaro. Initially, GM had a project in the works, a two-seater concept car that was more of a sleek, European-style sports car. It was even codenamed Banshee, but market realities and internal GM politics meant that project was shelved. From the ashes of that cancelled project, a new idea had to rise. Pontiac needed to adapt, to create something new from the remnants of the old. Does this sound familiar? This is where the genius of Pontiac's marketing team, led by visionaries like John DeLorean, came into play. They didn't just want a name. They wanted an identity. They needed something that captured the raw, fiery spirit of their new car. The name had to scream performance, passion, and a touch of the mythic. Firebird. It was perfect. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. It connected the car directly to the legend of the Phoenix. This wasn't just another car. It was a symbol of rebirth for Pontiac's performance ambitions in this new market segment. It was born from the figurative ashes of another project, ready to take flight and challenge the established order. The name evoked images of soaring power and untamable energy. Think about it, a firebird, a bird made of fire. It's an image that immediately communicates speed, heat, and a wild, almost supernatural force. This poetic connection was a masterstroke of branding. It gave the car a soul before its tires ever even hit the pavement. When the first Pontiac Firebird rolled out in 1967, it wasn't just a rebadged Camaro. It had its own distinct Pontiac styling, the integrated bumper, the split grille, the unique taillights. And under the hood it had that legendary Pontiac V8 power. The name promised a fiery spirit, and the car delivered. It was a machine that looked like it was in motion even when it was standing still, a creature of myth brought to life in steel and chrome. Every time you see that iconic screaming chicken hood decal on a Trans Am, remember its origin. That isn't just a bird. It's a phoenix. It's a direct link to that ancient myth of a creature that cannot be defeated, that always rises from the ashes, more powerful than before. The name Firebird perfectly encapsulated the late 60s. It was an era of rebellion, of pushing boundaries, and of expressing individuality. Owning a Firebird wasn't just about transportation. It was a statement. It said you were bold, you were passionate, and you had a bit of that fiery, untamable spirit within you. The car, like the myth, became a legend in its own right, a symbol of American muscle that endured for decades. It constantly reinvented itself, adapting to new eras, but always retaining that core identity, the spirit of the Phoenix, forever reborn in a blaze of glory. So the next time you hear the rumble of a Pontiac V8 or see that classic silhouette cruise by, you'll know the full story. It's not just a car. It's a legend reborn from the ashes, a myth you can drive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into automotive history. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our series. We'd love to hear your own Firebird stories in the comments below. Until next time, keep the passion burning. By the late 1960s, the automotive world was a battlefield. The air crackled with the roar of V8 engines and the scent of burning rubber. Ford had unleashed a phenomenon with the Mustang, and Chevrolet had answered the call with its own pony car, the Camaro. The youth market was on fire, and every automaker wanted a piece of the action. Over at Pontiac, a division of General Motors known for its blend of style and performance, the pressure was mounting. They watched as their corporate cousin, Chevrolet, basked in the glory of the Camaro. Pontiac needed an answer, a car that could not only compete but dominate. They needed a legend. This is the story of how that legend was born. It's a tale of ambition, rivalry, and a maverick engineer who dared to break the rules. This is the story of the Pontiac Firebird. To understand the Firebird, you have to understand the man who willed it into existence, John Zachary DeLorean. If you only know his name from the gull-winged, stainless steel car of the 80s, you're missing the best part of the story. In the 1960s, DeLorean was Pontiac's chief engineer, and he was nothing short of a rock star in the automotive world. Tall, charismatic, and brilliant, he had a flair for marketing and an almost supernatural ability to understand what young buyers wanted. He wasn't just building cars. He was building an image, a lifestyle. He was the mastermind behind the Pontiac GTO, the car that many credit with starting the entire muscle car craze. DeLorean saw the Mustang and Camaro not as threats, but as opportunities. He knew Pontiac could do it better. He envisioned a car that was more than just a rebadged Camaro. It had to have its own soul, its own identity. It needed to be distinctly Pontiac, A perfect marriage of European-inspired handling and raw American horsepower. His initial dream was a radical two-seat sports car, codenamed the Banshee. This was a sleek, fiberglass-bodied machine that looked like it had driven straight out of the future. Prototypes were built, and they were stunning. They were low, aggressive, and had the performance to back up the looks. But the Banshee was *2 good. It posed a direct threat to another, very important car within the General Motors family, the Corvette. The top brass at GM saw the Banshee and got nervous. The unwritten rule at GM was clear: nothing outshines the Corvette. So, with heavy hearts, they pulled the plug on DeLorean's dream project. It was a crushing blow, but DeLorean was not a man who gave up easily. If he couldn't build his own sports car from scratch, he would take what GM gave him and transform it into something uniquely his own. The platform GM offered was the F-body, the very same chassis used for the Chevrolet Camaro. This is where the internal rivalry at General Motors really heats up. Pontiac and Chevrolet were like competitive siblings living under the same roof. They shared parts, platforms, and a corporate parent, but they were in a constant battle for sales, prestige, and bragging rights. The engineers at Pontiac looked at the Camaro and saw a great starting point, but they were determined to make their version superior. They weren't just going to slap a new grille and some badges on a Camaro and call it a day. They were going to infuse it with Pontiac DNA, so the team went to work. DeLorean, now the head of the entire Pontiac division, led the charge. They started with the styling. The Firebird received a distinctive front end, with its headlights integrated into the grille, creating a clean, aggressive beak that would become a signature of the brand. The rear featured slit-like taillights that echoed the look of the GTO. It was a subtle but significant change that gave the Firebird a more sophisticated, predatory look compared to the Camaro. It looked sleeker, more refined, and undeniably Pontiac. But the real magic happened under the skin. The Pontiac engineers were masters of suspension tuning. While the Camaro was a fantastic straight-line performer, Pontiac wanted their car to handle the curves with more grace and precision. They reworked the suspension, fitting stiffer springs and beefier anti-sway bars. The goal was to give the driver more confidence, to create a car that felt planted and responsive on a winding road, not just a drag strip. This focus on handling was a key differentiator. A Camaro was a brawler. A Firebird was a fencer, just as deadly but with more finesse. And then there was the power. GM had a rule that limited engine size in its smaller cars. A rule DeLorean had famously skirted with the GTO. While the top-of-the-line Camaro offered a 396 cubic inch big block, Pontiac's engineers took a different approach. They were experts at squeezing every last ounce of power out of their own V8 engines. Instead of a big block, they offered a range of potent Pontiac power plants. The top engine option was the mighty 400 cubic inch V8, borrowed from their full-size cars. In the lightweight Firebird, it was an absolute monster. Pontiac offered the Firebird 400 in several states of tune, including the legendary Ram Air versions. These featured functional hood scoops that fed cool, dense air directly into the engine, boosting horsepower and performance. A Ram Air Firebird was a serious piece of hardware, a car that could go toe-to-toe with just about anything on the street. It announced its presence with a deep guttural rumble that was pure Pontiac. The competition was fierce, but the Firebird quickly carved out its own territory. It wasn't just a Camaro clone. It was a genuine contender, a car that offered a unique blend of style, handling, and brute force. John DeLorean and his team had succeeded. They had taken a corporate mandate and turned it into a masterpiece. They had navigated the tricky internal politics of General Motors, overcome the disappointment of the canceled Banshee, and created a car that would become an icon. The first-generation Firebird laid the groundwork for a legacy that would span over 3 decades. It established Pontiac as a true performance leader, and proved that even within the confines of a giant corporation, vision and passion could triumph. The quest for performance had led to the birth of a legend, a car forged in the fires of competition and destined for greatness. The Firebird had taken flight. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. If you love classic muscle cars and their incredible stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next chapter. We've got plenty more rubber to burn and stories to tell. We'll see you in the next one. Alright, let's turn back the clock. We're heading to the mid-1960s, a time when the American auto industry was buzzing with a new kind of energy. The youth market was booming, and a new category of car was taking over the streets: the pony car. Ford had struck gold with the Mustang, and every other manufacturer was scrambling to catch up. General Motors was no exception. Their answer? The F-body platform. Now you've probably heard of its most famous offspring, the Chevrolet Camaro. It hit the scene in late 1966 and was an instant sensation. But just a few months later, in February of '67, its sibling arrived. And this one had a different kind of fire in its belly. This was the Pontiac Firebird. From the very beginning, the Firebird was more than just a rebadged Camaro. Sure, they shared the same basic skeleton, the Coke bottle shape, the long hood, the short deck, but Pontiac, under the visionary leadership of John DeLorean, was determined to give their car a unique identity. They couldn't change the core structure, but they could infuse it with Pontiac's signature blend of performance and style, and they did. Just look at the front end. Where the Camaro had a simple, clean grille, the Firebird sported that iconic integrated bumper and split grille design, a look borrowed from the GTO. The quad headlights were neatly tucked into the ends, giving it a more aggressive, almost predatory stare. It looked wider, lower, and frankly more expensive. Around back, the differences continued. The Firebird featured louvered, slit taillights, another nod to its big brother, the GTO. It was a subtle touch, but it spoke volumes. It told the world this wasn't just another pony car. This was a Pontiac, a brand synonymous with performance. It had a different soul, a certain swagger that set it apart. Inside, the story was the same. The Firebird offered a more upscale interior, with plusher materials and a dashboard layout that felt a little more refined, a little more driver-focused. It was designed to appeal to a slightly more mature, discerning buyer who wanted the excitement of a pony car, but with a touch of European Grand Touring flair. But the real magic, the heart of the Firebird legend, was under the hood. Pontiac didn't just drop in a Chevy engine and call it a day. No, they used their own power plants, and this is where the Firebird truly established its own legacy. While the base model came with a sophisticated overhead cam inline-six, a pretty advanced engine for its time, it was the V8 options that everyone lusted after. And at the top of that mountain, reigning supreme, was the Firebird 400. This wasn't just an engine, it was a statement. A massive 400 cubic inch Pontiac V8, churning out a formidable 325 horsepower right out of the box. This was the engine that gave the Firebird its voice, that deep, guttural rumble that would become its calling card for decades. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated American muscle. The Firebird 400 wasn't just about straight-line speed, though. Pontiac's engineers worked hard on the suspension. They gave the Firebird wider rear leaf springs and traction bars to help put that massive power down without turning the tires into smoke. It was a more composed, better-handling car than many of its rivals. It felt planted, confident. Think about what it must have been like in 1967. You pull up to a stoplight in your brand-new Firebird 400. The car next to you might be a Mustang or even a Camaro, but you know you have something special. The rumble from your tailpipes is deeper, more menacing. The chrome 400 badges on the hood scoops are a clear warning. When the light turns green, you unleash a wave of torque that pushes you back in your seat, and the world blurs. That was the experience that started a legend. The '67 model was a huge success, but Pontiac didn't rest. For 1968, they refined the formula. The most noticeable change was the deletion of the side vent windows, giving the car a cleaner, more modern look. They also added federally mandated side marker lights, which Pontiac cleverly designed to incorporate their arrowhead logo. It was a small detail, but it showed their commitment to style. Under the hood, the 400 engine received even more potent options. You could now get the Ram Air package, which featured functional hood scoops that fed cool, dense air directly into the engine. This bumped horsepower and made the Firebird 400 a true street fighting machine. There was also the 400 HO or high output, which took things a step further. Pontiac was in a power war, and they were bringing heavy artillery. That came 1969, the final year for the first-generation body style, and many would argue it was the best. The car received a significant facelift. The front end was completely restyled with a new grille, a more prominent chrome beak, and single headlight bezels that gave it a wider, more aggressive stance. The whole car looked sleeker, more muscular. The fenders were creased, the body lines were sharper. It was a stunning evolution. The interior got a major update too, with a new dashboard and instrument panel that was more modern and better integrated. It felt like a completely new car from behind the wheel. But the biggest news for 1969 was hidden in the option codes. It was a special package, coded WS4. It cost a little over $700, which was a hefty sum back then. But what you got for that money was the birth of an icon, the Trans Am, named after the Trans-American Racing Series. The first Trans Am performance and appearance package transformed the Firebird. Every single one was painted cameo white with Tyrol blue racing stripes. It had a unique rear spoiler, functional fender air extractors, and most importantly, the Ram Air 3 400 engine as standard. An even more powerful Ram Air 4 was optional. The Trans Am wasn't just a muscle car. It was a total performance machine, arguably one of the best handling American cars of its era. It was Pontiac's ultimate expression of the Firebird concept. They only built 697 of them in 1969, including just 8 convertibles, making it incredibly rare and sought after today. So from 1967 to 1969, in just 3 short years, the Pontiac Firebird had carved out its own unique space in the automotive world. It was born from the same clay as the Camaro, but it was shaped by a different hand, fired in a different kiln, and imbued with a spirit all its own. It was stylish, sophisticated, and, thanks to engines like the mighty 400, unapologetically powerful. This was the foundation, the genesis of a legend that would soar for over 3 decades. The first fire had been lit. Thanks so much for watching this chapter of our journey. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the history of the Firebird, make sure to hit that like button, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, where things get even wilder in the 1970s. We'll see you then. The 1960s had been a decade of revolution. A cultural earthquake that shook the foundations of society. As the calendar pages turned, ushering in the 1970s, the world wasn't just entering a new decade. It was stepping into a new reality. The aftershocks of the 60s were still reverberating, creating a landscape of uncertainty, change, and raw, untamed energy. The air was thick with the scent of rebellion, the sounds of protest, and the promise of a future that was anything but predictable. Across the nation and the world, a generational rift was widening. The ongoing Vietnam War cast a long, dark shadow, fueling a powerful anti-war movement. Young people were questioning authority, tradition, and the very values their parents held dear. They were taking to the streets, their voices rising in a chorus of dissent, demanding peace and social justice. This was the era of counterculture, a vibrant, chaotic movement that celebrated individuality and freedom from the constraints of the old guard. It was a time when conformity was the enemy, and self-expression was the ultimate goal. This spirit of rebellion found its soundtrack in the explosive music scene. Massive music festivals like the legendary Woodstock in '69 weren't just concerts. They were tribal gatherings, temporary cities built on a foundation of peace, love, and rock and roll. The music itself was evolving, getting louder, heavier, and more experimental. Artists were pushing boundaries, their lyrics reflecting the turmoil and aspirations of a generation hungry for change. The raw power of a guitar riff, the thunder of a drum solo, it was the perfect anthem for a world in flux. And in this turbulent new world, the automobile couldn't remain a passive observer. Cars have always been more than just transportation. They are rolling sculptures, metal canvases that reflect the mood and spirit of their time. If the cars of the 50s were optimistic and chrome-laden, and the early 60s were about clean, tailored performance, the dawn of the 70s demanded something different. It demanded cars that were as loud, expressive, and unapologetic as the people driving them. The subtlety of the past was fading, replaced by a desire for raw, visceral power and in-your-face style. Automakers felt this shift in the cultural tectonic plates. They knew that to capture the hearts and minds of this new generation of buyers, they had to speak their language. This meant designs that were more aggressive, more daring, and more emotional. It was no longer enough for a car to be fast. It had to look fast, sound fast, and feel like an extension of the driver's own rebellious spirit. The muscle car era was reaching its zenith, but it was also transforming, shedding its clean-cut image for something a little more wild, a little more untamed. Pontiac, a brand that had built its reputation on performance and style, was right at the heart of this transformation. They had tasted massive success with the GTO and the original Firebird, cars that perfectly captured the muscle car mania of the mid to late 60s. But as the new decade dawned, they knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. The world was changing, and the Firebird had to change with it. The first-generation Firebird, a handsome and capable machine based on the Camaro platform, was a product of its time. But the 1970s demanded a new statement, a new icon. The designers and engineers at Pontiac were tasked with a monumental challenge: redesign the Firebird for a new age. They had to create a car that not only performed on the track and the street, but also resonated with the raw, expressive mood of the early 70s. This wasn't going to be a simple refresh or a minor facelift. This was a ground-up rethinking of what a pony car could be. They needed to create something that would stand out in a crowded field, a car that would turn heads and quicken pulses, a car that would become a legend. The result of their efforts, which debuted in early 1970, was nothing short of breathtaking. The second-generation Firebird was a radical departure from its predecessor. Where the first gen was handsome and somewhat conventional, the new car was pure, unadulterated automotive theater. It was lower, wider, and impossibly sleek. Its long hood and short deck profile were exaggerated, giving it an aggressive, predatory stance. The most striking feature was its front end. The traditional chrome bumper was gone, replaced by a revolutionary Enduraplastic nose that seamlessly integrated the grille and headlights. This wasn't just a design choice, it was a statement. It was modern, aerodynamic, and it gave the Firebird a face unlike anything else on the road. The body lines flowed with a European-inspired grace, a sensuousness that was missing from many of its blocky, muscular contemporaries. The smooth, clean flanks were punctuated by functional air extractors on the front fenders and muscular wheel arches that hinted at the power lurking within. It was a design that was both brutish and beautiful, a perfect paradox for a complicated time. It looked like it was slicing through the air even when it was standing still. This new Firebird was a direct reflection of the era's ethos. It was expressive, it was loud, and it absolutely refused to be ignored. Pontiac didn't just stop at the exterior. They understood that the experience had to be holistic. The interior was redesigned to be a driver-focused cockpit. The dashboard wrapped around the driver, putting all the controls and gauges within easy reach and sight. The engine-turned aluminum trim on the Trans Am model's dash was a nod to classic racing cars, a touch of sophisticated performance that elevated the interior beyond mere function. The seats were lower, the steering wheel was thick, and the whole environment was designed to make you feel connected to the machine and the road. And then there was the power. Pontiac continued to offer a range of powerful V8 engines, from the potent 350 to the tire-shredding 400 and the legendary 455. These weren't quiet, refined engines. They rumbled with a deep, menacing growl that was the perfect soundtrack for the car's aggressive looks. The top-tier Trans Am model became the ultimate expression of this philosophy. It wasn't just an option package. It was a comprehensive performance machine. It featured a functional shaker hood scoop that poked through the hood, vibrating with the engine's torque, a visual and visceral reminder of the beast beneath. It also came with functional fender vents, a rear spoiler, and a suspension tuned for handling that could challenge sports cars from around the world. The new Firebird was more than just a car. It was a cultural artifact. It perfectly captured the zeitgeist of the early 1970s. It was a symbol of rebellion, a 2-ton piece of rolling sculpture that thumbed its nose at convention. It was the automotive equivalent of a guitar solo, loud, proud, and full of emotion. While the world grappled with war, social upheaval, and an uncertain future, the Pontiac Firebird offered a form of escape, a 400 cubic inch dose of adrenaline and freedom. It was a machine built for a generation that valued expression over subtlety and power over politeness. Pontiac had not just redesigned a car. They had created the poster child for a new, wilder decade. This new Firebird wasn't just built for the 70s. In many ways, it helped define them. The 1970s would prove to be a tumultuous decade for the American auto industry, with fuel crises and new regulations on the horizon that would challenge the very existence of cars like the Firebird. But in that moment, at the dawn of the decade, it stood as a triumphant testament to the power of design and engineering to capture the spirit of an age. It was a raw, loud, and expressive machine for a raw, loud, and expressive time. And its legend was just beginning. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back to the dawn of the 70s. If you enjoyed this look at how culture shapes the cars we love, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from automotive history. We'd love to have you along for the ride. Welcome back to our journey through automotive history. Today we're stepping into a new decade, the 1970s, a time of radical change, not just in culture, but in car design. And right at the forefront of that change was Pontiac, ready to unleash a legend. Get ready because this is Chapter 6. A new shape takes flight. The year is 1970, and the curtain rises on the second-generation Pontiac Firebird. If the first generation was a confident statement, this new car was a visceral roar. Gone were the familiar lines of the late 60s, replaced by something utterly new, something that looked like it was sculpted by the wind itself. It was sleek, it was aggressive, and it sat low to the ground with a predator stance. This wasn't just a redesign, it was a revolution. The design team, under the legendary Bill Mitchell, drew inspiration not from other cars, but from the sleek, aerodynamic forms of European sports cars and even jet fighters. This was a car designed to look fast even when it was standing perfectly still. The most striking feature, the one that immediately set it apart from everything else on the road, was its face. The iconic split grille was gone, replaced by a full-width Endura bumper that housed two deep-set grilles. It gave the Firebird a determined, almost menacing look, and then there was the profile. That long, sweeping hood seemed to stretch on for miles, leading into a fastback roofline that flowed seamlessly into a short, cam-style tail. The car's Coke bottle styling was more pronounced than ever, with muscular haunches flaring out over the rear wheels. The doors were long, the side glass was frameless, and the whole car sat on a wider track, giving it an incredibly planted and powerful presence. It looked exotic, expensive, and a world away from its pony car origins. But this new Firebird wasn't just a pretty face. It was built on the same F-body platform as its cousin, the Chevrolet Camaro, but Pontiac engineers worked their magic to give it a distinct personality. The handling was a major focus. The new suspension geometry, combined with a wider stance and improved weight distribution, made this Firebird a true driver's car. It was more nimble, more responsive, and more confident in the corners than its predecessor. It begged to be driven on a winding road, not just shown off at a stoplight. Step inside, and the cockpit-inspired theme continued. The dashboard wrapped around the driver, putting all the controls and gauges within easy reach. The high-back bucket seats were supportive, and the overall feel was one of being in command of a serious machine. It was a space designed for driving, pure and simple. For 1970, Pontiac knew that one size didn't fit all. They offered a range of Firebird models to suit different tastes and budgets. The base Firebird was a stylish and capable starting point, often equipped with a smooth Chevrolet-sourced inline-six engine. But for those who wanted more, Pontiac had options. First up was the Firebird Esprit. This was the luxury-oriented model. It offered a plusher interior, extra sound insulation for a quieter ride, and distinctive exterior trim. The Esprit was for the driver who appreciated style and comfort as much as performance. It was the sophisticated member of the Firebird family, proving that muscle could also have manners. Then there was the Formula. The Formula was the sleeper of the lineup, a true performance bargain. It packed a serious punch without all the flashy graphics of its more famous sibling. And that brings us to the top of the mountain, the king of the hill, the Trans Am. If the standard Firebird was a revolution, the 1970 Trans Am was a declaration of war on the mundane. It took the stunning new body and dialed everything up to 11. Every Trans Am was finished in a brilliant polar white, with a bold blue racing stripe running up the center of the car. It was an unforgettable look. But the Trans Am was so much more than just a paint job. It featured a functional shaker hood scoop that poked through the hood, vibrating with the engine's rumble. It had functional air extractors on the front fenders to help cool the brakes. A full-width rear spoiler for downforce and unique front and rear air dams. This was a car that used aerodynamics not just for looks, but for performance. Under that shaker scoop, you could find one of two legendary engines, the Ram Air 3400 V8, rated at 345 horsepower, or the Holy Grail, the Ram Air 4, which delivered a staggering 370 horsepower. These were race-bred engines in a street car. The Trans Am also came standard with the ultimate handling package, featuring heavy-duty suspension, larger sway bars, and quick ratio steering. It was, without a doubt, one of the best-handling American cars of its era. As the years progressed, the second-generation Firebird continued to evolve. In 1971, the styling remained largely the same. But new high-back bucket seats became standard across the line, enhancing the car's sporty interior. However, storm clouds were gathering for the entire muscle car industry. Rising insurance premiums and tightening emissions regulations began to take their toll. This led to a drop in compression ratios, and consequently, a drop in horsepower ratings across the board. But Pontiac wasn't giving up. For 1971, they introduced a new top dog engine, the legendary 455 HO or high output. This massive 7.5-liter V8 was all about torque. While its advertised horsepower was 335, its real strength was its ability to pull like a freight train from any RPM. The 455 HO proved that even in a changing world, there was no replacement for displacement. It became the standard engine in the Trans Am, ensuring its place at the top of the performance food chain. By 1972, the industry-wide challenges continued. A labor strike actually halted production, making 1972 models particularly rare. Cosmetically, the biggest change was a new honeycomb pattern for the grills, a subtle but handsome update. The 455 HO remained the top engine option, a beacon of power in an increasingly regulated landscape. Then came 1973, a pivotal year for the Firebird. While the basic shape remained, it was a year of both great loss and incredible innovation. The SD455 was quite simply a full-blown racing engine barely detuned for street use. It featured a strengthened block, forged components, and high-flow cylinder heads. It was a hand-built masterpiece, an engine designed to withstand the rigors of the track. Even with the restrictive regulations of the time, it was conservatively rated at 290 net horsepower, though its actual output was much, much higher. The Super Duty 455 was the last gasp of the original muscle car era, a final defiant roar from Pontiac's performance engineers. And in 1973, the Trans Am received its most iconic visual element, the giant optional hood decal. Known colloquially as the Screaming Chicken, this massive stylized bird graphic sprawled across the entire hood. It was bold, it was audacious, and it became synonymous with the Trans Am's rebellious spirit. A 1973 Trans Am SD455 with the full hood bird is, for many, the ultimate expression of the second-generation Firebird. The period from 1970 to 1973 was a turbulent but brilliant chapter for the Pontiac Firebird. It saw the birth of a timeless design, the introduction of legendary models like the Formula and Trans Am, and the creation of the awe-inspiring Super Duty 455 engine. This new shape didn't just take flight. It soared, cementing its place as one of the most desirable and iconic American cars ever built. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the early second-gen Firebird. This car truly set the stage for the decade to come. If you enjoyed this chapter of automotive history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what happens next. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which model from this era is your favorite? The Esprit, the Formula, or the mighty Trans Am? Let us know. Until next time, keep the passion for driving alive. Alright, let's fire up the engine and dive into the chapter that truly defines the legend. Chapter 7. The Trans Am takes the spotlight. If the GTO was the opening act, the Trans Am was the headliner that brought the whole stadium to its feet. This wasn't just a car. It was a statement, a rolling piece of American bravado. By the late 1960s, the muscle car wars were at a fever pitch. Every manufacturer was scrambling to build the baddest, fastest machine on the block. Pontiac, never one to back down from a fight, looked at its already potent Firebird and thought, we can do more? And boy, did they. They took the lessons learned from the GTO, borrowed a name from the popular Trans-American Racing Series, and unleashed a legend. The 1969 Trans Am was a rare bird, quite literally. Dressed exclusively in cameo white with blue racing stripes, it was a homologation special, designed to make the Firebird eligible for the track. But the 1970s... Oh, the 1970s. That's when the Trans Am truly came into its own and became the icon we know and love today. While other muscle cars were being neutered by emissions regulations and an oil crisis, the Trans Am defiantly stood its ground. It was the last gunslinger in a town that had gone soft. Let's talk about the design because you can't discuss the Trans Am without picturing it. The second-generation models were pure automotive theater. You had those aggressive, aerodynamic lines, the flared wheel arches, and the functional air extractors on the fenders. It looked like it was doing 100 miles per hour just sitting in a parking lot. It was a masterpiece of aggressive yet graceful styling that has rarely been matched since. And then there was the single most iconic feature of any muscle car, ever, the shaker hood scoop. Bolted directly to the engine's air cleaner, it poked through a hole in the hood, vibrating and shaking with the rumble of the V8 beneath it. It wasn't just for show. This was a living, breathing part of the engine, force-feeding cool, dense air into the carburetor. Every twitch and shudder of that scoop told you about the power waiting to be unleashed. It was a visual promise of the performance that lay under your right foot. Speaking of which, let's talk about the heart of the beast. That big, booming Pontiac V8. In an era when horsepower was becoming a dirty word, Pontiac kept the faith. They offered the massive 455 cubic inch V8, a torque monster that could shred tires with ease. Later, they refined the 400, creating the legendary TA 6.6. While the horsepower numbers on paper might have dipped from the 60s peak, the real-world performance was still staggering. The sound alone was intoxicating, a deep, throaty burble at idle that erupted into a thunderous roar when you opened it up. It was the soundtrack of American rebellion. The Trans Am became more than just a car. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was the ultimate symbol of freedom and defiance. While the world was telling you to slow down, to be sensible, the Trans Am screamed, "No way!" It was unapologetically loud, unapologetically fast, and unapologetically American. And we can't ignore its starring role on the silver screen. In 1977, a black and gold special edition Trans Am became the real star of Smokey and the Bandit. That movie didn't just sell tickets, it sold Trans Ams like nothing else. Suddenly, every kid in America wanted to be the Bandit, outrunning the law with a smile on their face, and Sally Field in the passenger seat. The screaming chicken decal on the hood became a badge of honor, an emblem of cool recognized the world over. The Trans Am became the pinnacle of Pontiac performance. It carried the torch for the American muscle car through its darkest days, refusing to let the flame die out. It was a perfect storm of killer looks, big Q power, and Hollywood charisma. For a generation, it wasn't just the car they wanted. It was the car they needed. It represented a confidence and swagger that felt uniquely American. It was a reminder that even when things get tough, you can still put your foot down, leave a little rubber on the pavement, and have a damn good time doing it. The Trans Am wasn't just the last of the old-school muscle cars. In many ways, it was the best. It adapted, it survived, and it never ever apologized for what it was. Pure, unadulterated performance art. Thanks so much for watching this chapter of our story. If you're enjoying this deep dive into automotive history, do me a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you resubscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got plenty more ground to cover. Until next time, keep the passion alive. Welcome back to our series. Today, we're diving into Chapter 8, the Firebird versus the Muscle Wars. The late 1960s and early 1970s were the golden age of American muscle. It was a battlefield of horsepower, a clash of automotive titans where every manufacturer brought their A-game. The air was thick with the smell of burning rubber and high-octane fuel. This wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about getting there faster, louder, and with more style than anyone else. In one corner you had the Ford Mustang Mach-1, a name that screamed speed. It was a sleek, aggressive machine designed to dominate the street and the strip. With its shaker hoot scoop and powerful V8 options, the Mach-1 was a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of Ford's performance prowess. It was the evolution of the original pony car, now beefed up and ready for a fight. Then, roaring in from the Moper camp was the Dodge Challenger. Big, bold, and unapologetically powerful, the Challenger was the embodiment of Dodge's Scat Pack philosophy. With engine options like the legendary 426 HEMI, the Challenger wasn't just a car, it was a statement. Its wide stance and aggressive lines made it an intimidating presence on any road. Not to be outdone, American Motors Corporation, the underdog, threw its hat in the ring with the AMC Javelin. The Javelin, especially in its AMX form, proved that AMC could run with the big boys. It was praised for its sharp handling and unique styling, offering a distinct alternative to the offerings from the Big Three. It was a car with a lot of heart, and a surprising amount of punch. And of course there was the Chevrolet Camaro Z28, the Firebird's own stablemate, yet its fiercest rival. The Z28 was a track-focused weapon, born from the Trans Am racing series. It was all about balance, handling, and a high-revving small-block V8 that loved to scream. The Camaro was a pure, unadulterated sports car built for the enthusiast who craved cornering G-forces as much as straight-line acceleration. So where did this leave the Pontiac Firebird? In this arena of specialized gladiators, how did the Firebird carve out its own territory? While its rivals were often focused on a single mission, the Camaro on track performance, the Challenger on raw power, the Firebird played a different game. Pontiac understood that not every driver wanted a stripped-down race car for the street. They wanted more. The Firebird found its unique identity in a delicate, masterful balance. It was the car that offered both the thunder and the throne. You could get the brute force, of course. The Ram Air engines were legendary, delivering breathtaking power that could hold its own against any challenger. The sound, the acceleration, the pure mechanical muscle, it was all there. A Firebird Formula or Trans Am was a serious performance machine. But Pontiac didn't stop at the engine bay. They wrapped that power in a package of style and sophistication that was uniquely its own. While some muscle cars felt Spartan inside, the Firebird offered a more refined experience. The interiors were stylish, with well-designed dashboards, comfortable seats, and a feel that was a step above the competition. It was a cockpit, not just a cabin. Think about the iconic shaker hood scoop bolted directly to the engine, trembling with the power that lay beneath. It wasn't just functional, it was automotive theater. Or the distinctive front end, the split grille, and the aggressive bird of prey styling. A Firebird had presence. It looked fast even when it was standing still. This was the Firebird's secret weapon. Its allure wasn't just about horsepower figures or quarter-mile times. It was about personality. The Firebird was the muscle car you could drive to the drag strip on Friday night, and then take on a comfortable, stylish road trip on Saturday morning. It had a dual nature, part brawler, part gentleman. It offered a blend of raw American power and a touch of European-inspired grand touring luxury. This combination appealed to a broader audience. It was for the driver who appreciated the finer details as much as the raw performance. The person who wanted to feel the G-force pushing them back in their seat, but wanted to do it while sitting in a comfortable, well-appointed interior. While the Mustang, Challenger, Javelin, and Camaro were busy fighting for supremacy in their respective niches, the Firebird created a niche of its own. It was the sophisticated muscle car, the complete package. It proved that you didn't have to choose between power and luxury, between performance and personality. You could have it all. This unique balance is what cemented the Firebird's legacy. It wasn't just another car in the muscle car wars. It was a standout, a legend that offered a different kind of dream. It was more than just a machine. It was an experience. And that is why, even today, it remains one of the most beloved and iconic cars of the era. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the golden age of muscle, don't forget to hit that like button. And subscribe to the channel for more automotive history. We'll see you in the next chapter. Alright, let's rewind the clock. It's the early 1970s. Muscle cars are kings of the road. Their big block V8 South thundering down Main Street, a symbol of American power and freedom. The party felt like it would never end. But every party has a last call, and for the American muscle car, that call came in October 1973. This is the story of a crisis that brought an entire industry to its knees, and how one legendary bird refused to have its wings clipped. Imagine this. One day, you can fill up your gas-guzzling beast for a few bucks. The next, the pump is dry. Lines snake around the block for blocks, tempers flare, and a sense of panic sets in. This was the reality of the 1973 oil embargo. OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, turned off the tap to the United States and other nations, and overnight, the price of crude oil quadrupled. The shockwave was immediate and devastating. The American dream, once powered by cheap gasoline, was suddenly running on empty. For the auto industry in Detroit, it was a cataclysm. Those glorious high-horsepower V8 engines that had defined the muscle car era were suddenly public enemy number one. They were thirsty, inefficient, and seen as symbols of excess in a time of sudden scarcity. The government stepped in, and the pressure mounted from all sides. The newly formed Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, was already on the case, but the oil crisis supercharged their mission. First came the corporate average fuel economy standards, better known as CAFE. These regulations mandated that automakers achieve a certain average fuel economy across their entire fleet of cars. A manufacturer couldn't just sell gas guzzlers anymore. They had to balance them with smaller, more efficient models. This forced a dramatic shift in engineering philosophy. The race for horsepower was over. The race for miles per gallon had begun. Then came the emissions regulations, which got tighter and tighter every year. To meet these new standards, engineers had to add complex and restrictive new components. The most significant of these was the catalytic converter, which became mandatory on most new cars starting in 1975. This device, designed to clean up exhaust fumes, was essentially a chokehold on performance. It created backpressure in the exhaust system, robbing engines of precious horsepower. Engines that once roared now wheezed. The result was a brutal culling of the muscle car herd. One by one, the titans fell. The Plymouth Barracuda and its cousin, the Dodge Challenger, gone after 1974. The AMC Javelin, extinguished. Ford's mighty Torino, tamed into a shadow of its former self. The Chevrolet Chevelle SS, a legend of the streets, it became just a trim package. The very term muscle car started to sound like a relic from a bygone era. It was a mass extinction event, and it seemed like no performance car would be spared. But amidst the carnage, one car clung to life. The Pontiac Firebird. While its competitors were being put out to pasture, the Firebird adapted. It learned to survive in this hostile new environment. Now let's be clear, it wasn't easy. The Firebird suffered just like everyone else. The legendary Super Duty 455 engine, one of the last true fire-breathing V8 south of the era, had its final roar in 1974. Its power ratings were slashed year after year due to the new regulations. So how did the Firebird survive when so many others failed? It came down to a combination of clever marketing, brand loyalty, and sheer stubbornness from the folks at Pontiac. They understood something crucial. Even in a fuel crisis, people still wanted to dream. They still craved excitement and style. The Firebird couldn't offer the same raw, earth-shattering horsepower as before, but it could offer the asterisk-look asterisk. Pontiac doubled down on style. They introduced bolder graphics, more flamboyant decal packages, and distinctive design elements. Think of the iconic Screaming Chicken Hoot decal that became a symbol of the late 70s. It was audacious, loud, and unapologetic. The car looked fast, even if its 0 to 60 time was a fraction of what it used to be. The Trans Am, in particular, became the flagship of this new philosophy. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was a rolling piece of pop culture. While engine displacement and horsepower numbers were shrinking across the board, Pontiac's engineers worked miracles to keep the V8 spirit alive. They focused on handling and suspension, making the Firebird one of the best-handling American cars of its time. The radial-tuned suspension, or RTS, became a key selling point. So, while you might not win every drag race, you could definitely carve up a winding road with a grin on your face. It was a different kind of performance, one focused on balance and driver engagement, rather than just straight-line brute force. And then, in 1977, something magical happened. A movie. A little film called Smokey and the Bandit. Burt Reynolds, as the charismatic Bandit, piloted a black and gold special edition Trans Am, and in doing so, he cemented the Firebird's place in history. The car wasn't just a co-star, it was a character. It was cool, it was rebellious, and it was the ultimate getaway vehicle. Sales exploded. Everyone wanted a Bandit Trans Am. Pontiac couldn't build them fast enough. This single movie did more for the Firebird's survival than any marketing campaign ever could have. It proved that the American love affair with the performance car wasn't dead. It was just dormant. The Firebird's ability to adapt and survive is a testament to the ingenuity and passion of the people behind it. They faced an existential crisis head-on. When horsepower was taken away, they focused on style. When regulations choked the engines, they improved the handling. They understood that a muscle car was more than just a set of performance numbers. It was an attitude, a feeling, an escape. While its rivals became footnotes in automotive history, the Pontiac Firebird endured, carrying the torch for American performance through one of its darkest periods. It proved that even when the world changes, a true legend finds a way to fly. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. The story of the muscle car is full of these incredible twists and turns. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button. and subscribe to the channel for more stories from automotive history. Let me know in the comments which muscle car you think had the toughest time during the oil crisis. Until next time, keep the passion alive. Welcome back, everyone, to our ongoing saga of the Pontiac Firebird. We're now diving into Chapter 10. The Phoenix Survives the Flames. As we entered the mid-1970s, the world was changing. The muscle car era, with its roaring big block V8 South, was facing an existential threat. New regulations, the oil crisis, and shifting consumer attitudes were choking the life out of high-performance vehicles. Many legendary nameplates were either being tamed beyond recognition or disappearing entirely. For a moment, it looked like the Firebird, Pontiac's proud warrior, was next on the chopping block. Its own sibling, the Camaro, was even rumored to be facing cancellation. The future looked bleak. The glory days seemed over. But if there's one thing we know about the Firebird, it's that it's a survivor. Its very name evokes a creature that rises from the ashes, and that's exactly what it did. While other manufacturers were pulling back, Pontiac's top brass, people like the legendary John DeLorean in his final years with the company and his successors, made a bold decision. They knew they couldn't win the horsepower war anymore. The rules of the game had changed. The big 455 Super Duty engine, a last bastion of true muscle, was on its way out. The engines were getting smaller, weaker, and strangled by emissions equipment. So, if they couldn't sell raw power, what could they sell? They decided to sell an idea. An image, a feeling. Pontiac doubled down on what made the Firebird special from the very beginning: its audacious style and its rebellious spirit. The car didn't vanish, it evolved. It transformed. The focus shifted from what was under the hood to the experience of being behind the wheel. The Firebird became less about 0 to 60 times and more about turning heads and making a statement. It was a calculated gamble. While the engines might have been whispering compared to their predecessors, the car's visual presence was about to start screaming. This wasn't a retreat, it was a strategic pivot. Pontiac was about to prove that emotion could be just as powerful as horsepower. And in doing so, they would create one of the most enduring automotive icons of all time. And this is where our story takes a legendary turn. Enter the black and gold. In 1976, to celebrate Pontiac's 50th anniversary, the design team, led by the brilliant John Scanella, cooked up something truly special. They took a black Trans Am, a color that always looked menacing, and adorned it with gold pinstriping, gold snowflake wheels, and a gold-trimmed interior. It was stunning. But the masterpiece, the element that would define an entire era, was the hood decal. The Firebird graphic had been around for a few years. But for this special edition, it was blown up to epic proportions, sprawling across the entire hood in a symphony of gold and fire. The Screaming Chicken, as it was lovingly and cheekily nicknamed, was born. It was more than just a sticker. It was a declaration of defiance. In an age of automotive conformity and beige econoboxes, here was a car that wore its heart on its hood. It was loud, it was proud, and it was unapologetically American. Some critics at the time thought it was gaudy, over-the-top, even ridiculous. But the public went absolutely wild. The black and gold special edition Trans Am wasn't just a car. It was a cultural phenomenon. It perfectly captured the swagger and rebellious attitude of the late 70s. It was the car every kid dreamed of, the ultimate symbol of freedom on four wheels. The initial plan was for a limited run, but demand was so overwhelming that it became a regular and wildly popular option. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Just as the Screaming Chicken was taking flight in the public's imagination, Hollywood came calling. In 1977, a film called Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters. The movie's real star wasn't Burt Reynolds or Sally Field. It was their ride, a 1977 Pontiac Trans Am, say, black and gold, with that magnificent bird emblazoned on the hood. The car jumped, skidded, and outran the law with effortless cool. It was the perfect marketing tool, an hour-and-a-half-long commercial that made every single person watching want a Trans Am. Sales exploded. Pontiac couldn't build them fast enough. In 1976, they sold around 46,000 Trans Ams. This success was a testament to Pontiac's brilliant strategy. While the engines of the late 70s were a far cry from the Ram Air IVs of the Golden Age, with the top L78 400 cubic inch V8 making a modest 220 horsepower, it didn't matter. People weren't buying a spec sheet. They were buying a legend. They were buying the Bandit experience. The car's handling was actually superb for its time, thanks to ongoing suspension development. It was still fun to drive, it sounded great, and most importantly, it looked like $1,000,000. The Firebird proved that a car could be more than the sum of its parts. It could be an escape, a fantasy, a rolling piece of pop art. The Firebird didn't just survive the flames of the malaise era. It soared through them, more popular and more iconic than ever before. It redefined what a performance car could be in a post-muscle car world. It proved that style, image, and emotion were powerful currencies. By embracing its identity and giving the people a hero, even one with a little less muscle than before, Pontiac ensured that its legendary bird would not only live to fight another day, but would become one of the most recognizable and beloved cars in history. The Screaming Chicken wasn't just a decal. It was the symbol of the Firebird's triumphant rebirth. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of the Firebird's incredible story. The journey is far from over, and the 80s are just around the corner, bringing a whole new look and a new set of challenges. If you enjoyed this video and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time. Picture this. It's 1977. The air is filled with the sounds of disco. The world is changing, and on the silver screen, a legend is about to be born. Not an actor, not a director, but a car. This is the story of how a black and gold Pontiac Firebird Trans Am stole the show and became an immortal icon of pop culture. Welcome back to our series, and today, we're diving into Chapter 11, the icon of the silver screen. The film, of course, was Smokey and the Bandit. The plot was simple. Haul a truckload of Coors beer from Texarkana to Atlanta in 28 hours. A simple premise, but it needed something special to make it work. It needed a star car. And boy, did it get one. The 1977 Pontiac Trans Am, with its Screaming Chicken decal on the hood, its T-tops, and that unmistakable starlight black paint with gold accents, wasn't just a vehicle in the movie. It was a character. Before Smokey and the Bandit, the Trans Am was already a respected muscle car. It had performance, it had style, but it hadn't yet captured the collective imagination of the public. The movie changed everything. It transformed the Trans Am from a car into a symbol. A symbol of rebellion, of freedom, of outsmarting the man, and having a blast while doing it. Burt Reynolds' character, the Bandit, was the charismatic rogue, but the Trans Am was his trusty steed, the real enabler of his daring adventure. Let's break down why it works so perfectly. First, the car's performance was showcased in the most spectacular way possible. Every jump, every donut, every high-speed chase wasn't just action. It was a demonstration of the car's power and agility. Director Hal Needham, a legendary stuntman himself, knew exactly how to make the car look cool. The famous Mulberry Bridge jump, for instance, wasn't just a stunt. It was a moment of automotive apotheosis. The car didn't just clear the gap. It soared, cementing its image as an unstoppable force. The audience wasn't just watching a car chase. They were on a roller coaster ride, and the Trans Am was the main attraction. Second, the car's aesthetic was pure 70s swagger. That black and gold color scheme became instantly iconic. It was bold, it was flashy, and it screamed confidence. The Screaming Chicken hood decal, which had been a Pontiac design element for a few years, became legendary overnight. It was no longer just a logo. It was a badge of honor, a symbol of the wild, untamable spirit that the car represented in the film. You saw that bird and you immediately thought of the Bandit, of adventure, of sticking it to Sheriff Buford T. Justice. The movie's impact on sales was nothing short of astronomical. Pontiac had planned to discontinue the Trans Am's optional 6.6-liter V8 engine. But after the film's release, demand went through the roof. This wasn't just a fleeting trend. The film immortalized the Firebird. Even today, decades later, when you see a black second-generation Trans Am, your first thought is probably Smokey and the Bandit. It's a connection that's been burned into our collective cultural memory. The car became a staple of 70s and 80s nostalgia, appearing on posters, lunchboxes, and as toy cars in countless kids' bedrooms. It represented a fantasy that was just attainable enough to feel real. The fantasy of the open road, of being the hero of your own story, with the coolest car imaginable as your partner in crime. The movie created a character archetype for the car itself, the cool, fearless, and slightly mischievous anti-hero. It was the perfect ride for the charming rebel. While other movie cars were gadgets or tools, the Trans Am had a personality. It was the Bandit's wingman. Think about the scenes where the car seems to have a mind of its own, effortlessly dodging obstacles and outmaneuvering the police. It's personified. It's not just a machine, it's a co-conspirator in the fun. This cultural imprinting is incredibly powerful. It elevated the Pontiac Firebird Trans Am beyond the realm of automotive enthusiasm and into the mainstream. You didn't have to be a car person to know and love the Bandit's Trans Am. It transcended its mechanical parts and became a piece of Americana. A time capsule of an era when a V8 engine and a CB radio were all you needed for the adventure of a lifetime. Even as the muscle car era waned in the face of new regulations and the oil crisis, Smokey and the Bandit gave the Firebird one last glorious hurrah. It was a defiant roar against the dying of the light, a celebration of horsepower and attitude in a time of growing practicality. The movie ensured that while the era might be ending, the legend of the Firebird Trans Am would never fade away. It was and remains an icon of the silver screen, forever flying down a Georgia highway with a sheriff hot on its tail and a smile on its driver's face. So the next time you see that iconic black and gold car with the fiery bird on the hood, remember, it's more than just metal, rubber, and paint. It's a piece of movie history, a symbol of rebellion, and the undisputed star of one of the greatest car movies ever made. It is the car that made being a bandit look like the most fun you could ever have. Thanks so much for joining us for this chapter. If you love stories about legendary cars and their place in history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We have so many more icons to explore. Drop a comment below with your favorite memory of Smokey and the Bandit. We'll see you in the next video. Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into the Pontiac Firebird. Today, in what we're calling Chapter 12, we're shifting gears from horsepower and handling to heart and soul. We're exploring the Firebird not just as a car, but as a cultural icon, a symbol that roared its way into the very fabric of Americana. So how did a piece of machinery become so much more? How did it evolve from a dealership showroom to a symbol of freedom, rebellion, and the American dream itself? Well, it didn't just happen overnight. The Firebird story is intertwined with the cultural shifts of the late 20th century. It was born in an era of change, a time when the open road called out to a generation eager to write their own rules. Think about the quintessential American landscape. What do you see? Maybe a dusty desert highway stretching to the horizon, a drive-in theater screen flickering under a canopy of stars, or a neon-lit city street on a Saturday night. In so many of those mental pictures, there's a Firebird, its long hood and aggressive stance perfectly at home. It became the chariot for the modern-day cowboy, a steel horse for a new kind of frontier. The Firebird represented a potent cocktail of power and accessibility. It was a muscle car, yes, but it had a certain style, a sleekness that set it apart. It wasn't just about raw, untamed brute force. It was about doing it with flair. This car had an attitude, a personality that resonated with people who felt a little bit like outsiders, a little defiant. Driving a Firebird was a statement. It said you weren't afraid to stand out, to be a little louder, a little faster, and a lot cooler than the crowd. Music, of course, was the soundtrack to this rebellion, and the Firebird was right there in the mix. While it might not have had a dedicated anthem like some other cars, its spirit was woven into the DNA of rock and roll. It was the kind of car you'd imagine your favorite rock stars driving, cruising down the Sunset Strip with the T-tops off and the radio blasting. It embodied the energy, the freedom, and the anti-establishment vibe of the music. The driving beat of a classic rock song feels like the rumbling V8 of a Trans Am. They're both raw, powerful, and unapologetically American. The car became a visual shorthand for the rock and roll lifestyle. And then there's Hollywood. The silver screen has a unique power to elevate objects into legends, and for the Pontiac Firebird, its moment in the spotlight was transformative. You can't talk about the Firebird as a cultural icon without talking about one movie in particular, Smokey and the Bandit. That 1977 film didn't just feature a black and gold special edition Trans Am. It made it a co-star. The car, piloted by Burt Reynolds' charismatic Bandit, became a symbol of playful defiance against authority. It was fast, it was slick, and it was smarter than the cops. Every time that Trans Am launched over a creek or slid around a corner, leaving Sheriff Buford T. Justice in a cloud of dust, audiences cheered. The car wasn't just a getaway vehicle. It was the embodiment of the Bandit's charm and rebellious spirit. After that movie, sales of the black Trans Am skyrocketed. Everyone wanted a piece of that outlaw magic. They didn't just want the car. They wanted the feeling that came with it, the freedom, the adventure, the ability to outrun anything that stood in your way. But it wasn't just Smokey and the Bandit. A few years later, another black Firebird Trans Am would capture the imagination of a new generation, this time on the small screen. I'm talking, of course, about Kit from Knight Rider. This wasn't just a car, it was a character. Kit the Knight Industries 2000 was a high-tech, self-aware, virtually indestructible crime-fighting partner. He had a dry wit, a moral compass, and a cool sweeping red scanner light that became instantly recognizable. Kit transformed the Firebird from a symbol of a rogue outlaw to a symbol of a modern-day knight. It was the ultimate fantasy car. It wasn't just fast, it was intelligent, it was a hero. For kids growing up in the 80s, Kit represented the future, a world where technology and heroism merged. The show cemented the Firebird's place in pop culture, proving its versatility as a symbol. It could be the bad boy's ride or the hero's steed, but it was always, undeniably, the star. Beyond these two titans of the screen, the Firebird has appeared in countless other movies, music videos, and TV shows, often used as a quick and effective way to establish a character or a mood. Need to show someone is a cool, no-nonsense rebel from a small town? Put them in a late 70s Firebird. Want to evoke a sense of nostalgic, sun-drenched American freedom? A shot of a Firebird cruising down a highway does the trick. Its image became a powerful piece of visual language, understood by millions. This widespread visibility is how the Firebird's image became as recognizable and fundamentally American as symbols like the Golden Arches, the Coca-Cola bottle, or even Route 66. It represents a specific slice of Americana 1 filled with V8 engines, rock music, and a rebellious streak a mile wide. It speaks to a time of American confidence and swagger when cars were more than just transportation. They were expressions of identity. The Firebird logo itself, that screaming chicken on the hood, is a masterpiece of branding. It's aggressive, mythical, and utterly unforgettable. For owners, that decal wasn't just decoration. It was a badge of honor. It connected them to a tribe, a community of people who understood what the car represented. Whether you were at a car show, a drive-in, or just stopped at a gas station, that Firebird emblem was an instant conversation starter. Even as the years went on and the Firebird's production eventually came to an end in 2002, its status as a cultural icon has only grown stronger. The cars that survive are now cherished relics of a bygone era. They are rolling pieces of history, lovingly maintained by enthusiasts who are caretakers of a legacy. They represent a time when cars had soul, when design was daring, and when the feeling of freedom could be found behind the wheel on an open stretch of road. The Pontiac Firebird is more than just metal, glass, and rubber. It's a collection of memories and aspirations. It's the thrill of your first car, the soundtrack of your favorite songs, and the hero of your favorite movies. It's a symbol of defiance against the mundane, a promise of adventure just beyond the horizon. From the dusty highways of the West to the neon glow of the city, the Firebird carved out a permanent place in the American heart, forever flying as a symbol of freedom. Thanks so much for joining me on this cultural road trip. It's amazing how a car can mean so much to so many people. If you enjoyed this chapter, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We'd love to hear your own Firebird stories in the comments below. Until next time, keep the shiny side up. Welcome back, everyone, to Chapter 13 of our deep dive into the legendary Pontiac Firebird. Today, we're popping the hood to explore the very soul of this American icon, its engineering. We're talking about the raw power, the mechanical marvels, and the innovations that made the Firebird not just a car, but a living, breathing beast. The story of the Firebird's heart is a story of Pontiac's relentless pursuit of performance. It wasn't just about dropping a big engine into a chassis. It was about creating a symphony of steel and power. Let's start with the early days. When the Firebird first roared onto the scene in 1967, it offered a range of engines. But the one that truly set the tone was the 400 cubic inch V8. This wasn't just an engine, it was a statement. With its throaty growl and tire-shredding torque, it announced that the Firebird was here to compete with the best. But Pontiac was just getting started. The real magic began with the introduction of the Ram Air systems. The Ram Air 3, for instance, wasn't just a decal on the hood. It was a functional cold air induction system that forced cooler, denser air directly into the carburetor. This simple but brilliant innovation boosted horsepower and gave the Firebird a significant edge on the street and the strip. Imagine cruising down the boulevard, the twin scoops on your hood not just for show, but actively gulping air, feeding the beast that lies beneath. That was the essence of Pontiac engineering. Performance you could see, hear, and feel. Then came the Ram Air 4. This was the stuff of legends. A more aggressive camshaft, better flowing cylinder heads, and a high-rise aluminum intake manifold turned the 400 V8 into a high-revving monster. The sound it made was less of a rumble and more of a ferocious roar, a mechanical battle cry that sent shivers down the spine of its rivals. Driving a Ram Air 4 Firebird was an experience. It demanded respect. It was a car that connected you directly to the raw, untamed power of the muscle car golden era. As the 60s gave way to the 70s, the game changed, but Pontiac's commitment to power didn't. This is where the mighty 455 cubic inch engine enters the story. While other manufacturers were detuning their engines in the face of new regulations, Pontiac found a way to deliver massive low-end torque. The 455 HO, or high output, was a torque machine. It wasn't about high RPMs. It was about effortless, ground-pounding acceleration that pushed you back in your seat and held you there. The sound was different, to a deep, resonant growl, like a lullaby of steel and power, promising immense strength from the moment you turned the key. And then, at the peak of the muscle car mountain stood the 455 Super Duty. The SD455 was more than just an engine. It was a masterpiece, a barely tamed race engine released for the street. It featured a strengthened block, forged components, and high-flow cylinder heads designed for one thing: ultimate performance. This was an engine built by enthusiasts, for enthusiasts. In an era when performance was on the decline, the Super Duty Trans Am was a defiant middle finger to the establishment. It was the last of the true muscle car titans, and its legacy is untouchable. Each engine gave the Firebird a distinct personality. The Ram Air 3 was the athletic street fighter, quick and agile. The Ram Air 4 was the high-strung brawler, always ready for a fight. The 455 HO was the strong, silent type, with immense power held in reserve, and the 455 Super Duty? That was the heavyweight champion, the undisputed king. Of course, power is nothing without control. Pontiac's engineers knew this well. They paired these incredible engines with robust transmissions, like the Muncie 4-speed manual and the turbo-hydromatic 400 automatic. The Muncie gave drivers a direct, mechanical connection to the power, with each shift of the Hurst shifter feeling positive and satisfying. The TH400, on the other hand, was a heavy-duty automatic that could handle the immense torque of the big block engines without breaking a sweat, delivering firm, crisp shifts. But the innovation didn't stop there. The Firebird suspension was constantly evolving. From the beginning, it featured a unique setup with monoleaf rear springs to help control wheel hop under hard acceleration. Later, the second-generation Trans Am became a benchmark for handling. With its thick front and rear sway bars, specially tuned shocks, and radial tires a novelty at the time, it could outhandle many European sports cars of its day. This combination of brutal straight-line power and surprising cornering prowess is what made the Trans Am a true all-around performance machine. The engineers also focused on the driver's experience. Think of the iconic shaker hood scoop. It wasn't just mounted to the hood, it was bolted directly to the engine. So when you stomped on the gas, you could literally see the engine torque and twist under the hood. It was a visual reminder of the power at your command, a piece of mechanical theater that made driving a Firebird an unforgettable event. The deep growls of these engines were a fundamental part of the experience. They weren't just noise. They were a soundtrack of power. From the lumpy, impatient idle of a Ram Air 4 to the deep, thundering bass of a 455 Super Duty, each engine had its own voice. It was a sound that told a story of high compression, big displacement, and pure, unadulterated American horsepower. It was the sound of engineering excellence, a promise of the thrilling performance that awaited with the push of the pedal. This dedication to creating a complete performance package is what defined the Firebird. It was more than just a collection of parts. It was a holistic approach to building a car that excited all the senses. From the growl of the engine to the feel of the shifter and the way it carved through a corner, the Firebird was engineered to be an experience. It was, and still is, a true beast, born from the passion and ingenuity of Pontiac's finest engineers. Thanks so much for joining me on this mechanical journey. The story of the Firebird's engineering is a testament to an era when power was king. If you enjoyed this chapter, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. See you then. Welcome back to our journey through automotive history. Today, we're diving deep into Chapter 14, The Art of the Firebird. And trust me, art is the perfect word for it. The Pontiac Firebird wasn't just a car. It was a canvas, a masterpiece of American muscle car design that captured the hearts and imaginations of millions. It was a statement, a rolling sculpture that proved performance could be beautiful. So, what made the Firebird such a visual icon? Let's start with the most famous element of all, the screaming chicken. That massive, fiery bird decal sprawled across the hood wasn't just a graphic, it was a declaration. It screamed power, freedom, and a touch of rebellion. From its first appearance, it became the car's soul, an unmistakable symbol that let everyone know what was coming down the road. You saw that bird, and you knew you were looking at a legend. It was bold, it was audacious, and it was pure, unapologetic Pontiac. But the Firebird's artistry went far beyond that famous decal. Look at the lines of the car. The designers at Pontiac didn't just shape metal, they sculpted it. Think about the second-generation models from the early 70s to 81. They possessed these long, flowing hoods that seemed to stretch for miles, leading into a sharply raked windshield and a low-slung roofline. The entire silhouette was sleek, aerodynamic, and incredibly aggressive. It looked like it was slicing through the air, even when it was standing perfectly still. Then you have the curves. The Firebird wasn't about sharp, brutal angles. It was about sensuous, muscular curves. The fenders swelled out over the wheels, giving the car a powerful, athletic stance, like a predator ready to pounce. These weren't just functional pieces to cover the tires. They were sculpted fenders that flowed seamlessly into the body, accentuating the car's width and presence. The way the light played across those surfaces was pure poetry in motion. Designers treated the Firebird like a sculpture, carefully considering every line, every reflection, every shadow. And let's not forget the details that brought it all together. The shaker hood scoop, vibrating with the engine's rumble, wasn't just for performance. It was a piece of mechanical theater. The signature split grille on early models, the quad rectangular headlights of the late 70s, the full-width taillights that left an unforgettable impression as it sped away. Every single element was meticulously designed to contribute to a cohesive and stunning whole. The Firebird beautifully blended aggression with grace. It had the raw, muscular power you'd expect from a V8-powered beast, but it was packaged in a body that was undeniably elegant. This was a car that could look just as at home cruising down a boulevard on a Saturday night as it could tearing up a drag strip. It had a dual personality, part brute, part beauty, and that's what made it so compelling. As the years went on, the design evolved. The third generation brought a futuristic, wedge-shaped design that was pure 80s cool, with its hidden headlights and aerodynamic form. It looked like it was ripped straight from a science fiction movie. Then the fourth generation rounded out those edges, creating a smooth, predatory look that was a modern interpretation of the Firebird's classic spirit. Each generation had its own unique artistic identity, but they all shared that core DNA of being more than just a machine. The Firebird was, and still is, a cultural icon precisely because of its design. It was a car that made you feel something. It represented a certain kind of freedom, a spirit of adventure, and an appreciation for style. It wasn't just transportation. It was an experience. You didn't just drive a Firebird. You became part of its legacy. In a world where many cars are designed by wind tunnels and focus groups, the Firebird stands as a testament to a time when designers were artists, and a car could be a true form of expression. It wasn't just steel, glass, and rubber. It was a sculpture in motion, a moving piece of art that captured the aggressive, graceful, and untamable spirit of the American road. The Firebird proved that a car could be both a high-performance machine and a thing of breathtaking beauty. It was, in every sense of the word, automotive art. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the art of the Firebird. It's a car that truly deserves its place in the pantheon of design legends. If you love this journey, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next chapter. We've got so much more to explore together. See you in the next video. Video begins, showing a montage of Firebird owners with their cars, polishing them, driving, showing them off at car meets. The tone is warm and personal. Welcome back, everyone. We've spent a lot of time talking about the metal, the engine, the design, and the history of the Pontiac Firebird. But a car is nothing without the people who love it. Today, we're diving into the heart and soul of the Firebird legacy. You, the owners, the enthusiasts, the dreamers. This is Chapter 15, The People Behind the Wheel. From the very beginning, the Firebird wasn't just another car you bought off a lot. It was a statement. It was a piece of your identity you wore on the open road. When you bought a Firebird, you weren't just buying a vehicle. You were joining a family, a tribe of people who understood what it meant to have a little bit of thunder in their soul. It didn't matter if you were a high school kid who saved every penny from a summer job, or a seasoned mechanic who could rebuild a 400 V8 blindfolded. The common thread was a shared passion for this incredible machine. Let's talk about the mechanics first, the unsung heroes of the Firebird community. These are the folks with grease under their fingernails and a timing light in their toolbox. They're the ones who spent countless weekends in the garage, not just fixing problems but perfecting their cars. They understood the language of the engine, the subtle knock that meant a lifter needed adjusting, the satisfying roar when the carburetor was perfectly tuned. For them, the Firebird was a canvas. Every modification, every upgrade, was a brushstroke, creating a masterpiece that was uniquely theirs. They didn't just own a car. They had a relationship with it, a deep, mechanical bond built on sweat, knowledge, and a whole lot of love. Then you have the racers. For them, the Firebird wasn't just about looking good. It was about being fast. They took the performance in Pontiac's name to heart. From dusty drag strips on a Friday night to local autocross events on a Sunday morning, these were the people pushing the Firebird to its absolute limit. They were constantly chasing that extra tenth of a second, fine-tuning their suspension, experimenting with tire pressures, and swapping out gear ratios. The thrill wasn't just in winning. It was in the pursuit of perfection, in knowing they had extracted every last bit of potential from their machine. The camaraderie in the pits was just as important as the competition on the track. You'd see rivals lending each other tools, sharing tuning tips, and celebrating each other's victories. Because at the end of the day, they were all part of the same bird-loving flock. And we can't forget the everyday dreamers. These are the people who saw a Firebird cruise by when they were kids and said, one day, for them, the Firebird represented freedom, rebellion, and the American dream on four wheels. It was the car from their favorite movie, the one their cool older cousin had, the poster on their bedroom wall. The journey to finally getting one was often a story in itself. Years of saving, searching through classified ads, and finally, that magical day when they drove their dream car home. For this group, the car was a time machine. Getting behind the wheel wasn't just a drive. It was a trip back to a simpler time, a rolling piece of nostalgia that brought back memories of youth, first dates and summer nights with the T-tops off and the music blasting. The community that grew around this car is truly something special. Before the internet made everything so easy, this community was built in person. It was built at car shows, local cruise-ins, and impromptu meets in parking lots. It was built over swapped stories, shared advice, and friendly rivalries. People would spend hours just walking around, admiring each other's cars, pointing out rare options, and debating the merits of a Ram Air 3 versus a 455 Super Duty. These gatherings were more than just about cars. They were about connection. They were a place where a retired factory worker and a young IT professional could bond over a shared love for a Pontiac. The Firebird transcended age, background, and profession. I've heard so many incredible stories over the years. There's the story of the father and son who restored a 69 Trans Am together, bridging a generational gap and creating memories that would last a lifetime. There's the story of the woman who bought her 78 Firebird brand new and has driven it ever since, treating it like a member of her family. It's seen her through college, marriage, kids, and now grandkids. That car isn't just a classic. It's a rolling scrapbook of her life. There are stories of cross-country road trips, of chance encounters that led to lifelong friendships, all because of this car. Each scratch, each dent, each modification tells a tale. These aren't just vehicles. They are keepers of personal history. This is what makes the Firebird legend so enduring. Pontiac may be gone, but the spirit lives on in every garage where a Firebird is being lovingly cared for, on every road where a screaming chicken still commands respect, and in every story shared between enthusiasts. The car was the catalyst, but the people are the legacy. It A community that proves that a car can be so much more than just a way to get from point A to point B. It can be a passion, a hobby, an escape, and a core part of who you are. The Firebird wasn't just a car. For so many, it was and still is a way of life. Thank you for joining me on this look into the community behind the wheel. It's you guys who keep this flame alive. What's your Firebird story? I would absolutely love to read it, so please share it in the comments below. Your story is a part of this car's incredible history. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content celebrating the greatest cars ever made, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us grow and bring you more stories like this. We'll see you in the next chapter. Drive safe and keep the passion alive. Welcome back, everyone, to our ongoing saga of the Pontiac Firebird. We're now entering chapter 16, a period I like to call surviving the storm. We're talking about the late 1970s, specifically 1978 and 1979. This was a challenging time for American muscle. The glory days of the late 60s felt like a distant memory, buried under new regulations, an energy crisis, and a market that seemed to be turning its back on raw power. For many iconic cars, this was the end of the road. But not for the Trans Am. As we journey into 1978, the automotive world was a very different place. Performance as we once knew it was on life support. Big block engines were ghosts of the past, and horsepower numbers were a shadow of their former selves. Yet in this landscape of beige sedans and underpowered coupes, the Pontiac Trans Am stood tall, a defiant splash of color and attitude. It was like the last rebel at a PTA meeting, refusing to conform, refusing to fade away. The passion that birthed these cars hadn't disappeared. It had just been forced to adapt. Let's look at the 1978 Trans Am. Aesthetically, it was arguably at its peak. The design team at Pontiac, led by the legendary Bill Mitchell and his successor Irv Rubitsky, knew how to keep the Firebird looking fresh and aggressive. The quad rectangular headlights, which had debuted in '77, were now perfectly integrated into the sleek, aerodynamic front end. The iconic Screaming Chicken hood decal, which had become a cultural phenomenon, was bigger and bolder than ever. It wasn't just a graphic, it was a statement. It screamed defiance in a decade of quiet conformity. And Pontiac offered new T-top options this year. General Motors had been using Hurst-hatch T-tops, but for '78, they introduced their own factory design produced by Fisher. These were larger, offering a more open-air feel, and they sealed better, which was a welcome improvement for anyone who had dealt with leaky aftermarket tops. Cruising with the T-tops off, wind in your hair, with that shaker hood scoop vibrating in front of you, that was the essence of the late '70s Trans Am experience. It was pure, unadulterated cool. Now, let's talk about what was under that shaker hood. The top engine option for 1978 was the W7 26.6-liter V8, also known as the TA 6.6, while the standard 400 cubic inch V8 was putting out a respectable but uninspiring 180 horsepower. The W72 was a different beast entirely. It was rated at 220 horsepower, which might not sound like much today, but in 1978, it was a huge deal. This was a genuine performance engine, featuring a higher compression ratio, a more aggressive camshaft, and better flowing cylinder heads borrowed from the earlier 350 high-output engine. It was a true link back to the golden era. The W72 package wasn't just about the engine either. It came bundled with the WS6 Special Performance Package. This was a game-changer. The WS6 package included an upgraded suspension with stiffer springs, a larger diameter rear sway bar, and most importantly, brand new 15 by 8-inch snowflake cast aluminum wheels. These wider wheels allowed for wider tires, dramatically improving the car's handling and grip. A Trans Am with the W72 and WS6 packages wasn't just a straight-line pony car. It was one of the best-handling American cars of its time, capable of pulling impressive G-forces on the skid pad. It could genuinely hang with, and often beat, more expensive sports cars from Europe. Of course, we can't talk about the late '70s Trans Am without mentioning its co-star, Hollywood. Smokey and the Bandit had turned the black and gold special edition Trans Am into a global superstar in 1977. The demand was so overwhelming that Pontiac continued to cash in on this success. For 1978, they introduced another iconic color scheme, the Gold Special Edition, Often called the Solar Gold, or Macho Bird, this car flipped the script, featuring a stunning gold paint job with black accents and a brown pinstripe version of the Screaming Chicken. It was flashy, it was bold, and it was pure 1970s swagger. Paired with the tan interior, it created a look that is still beloved by collectors today. As 1979 rolled around, it marked the 10th anniversary of the Trans Am, which had first debuted back in 1969. To celebrate this milestone, Pontiac released one of the most famous special editions of all time, the 10th Anniversary Trans Am. This car was a masterpiece of late 70s design. It came in a unique silver and charcoal two-tone paint scheme, with a massive Superbird on the hood that extended over the roof and onto the rear deck lid. It was the first Trans Am to feature this hood bird design, and it was absolutely breathtaking. Inside, the 10th anniversary model was pure luxury. It featured silver leather seats with embroidered Firebird logos, red-lit gauges, and a premium sound system. It was the total package of performance and comfort. For the first time, power windows, power locks, and air conditioning were all standard on a Trans Am, but the real news was under the hood. While most 1979 Trans Ams came with either the Pontiac 400 or the Oldsmobile-sourced 403 V8, the 10th anniversary models equipped with the 4-speed manual transmission received the last of the legendary Pontiac 400 W72 engines. These were stockpiled from 1978 production, as Pontiac had to cease manufacturing the engine due to emissions regulations. Only a limited number were available, making these cars instant collectibles. 1979 was also the end of an era for another reason. It was the final year for any true big displacement Pontiac V8. The 400 cubic inch engine, a power plant that had defined Pontiac performance for over a decade, was gone for good. From 1980 onward, the Firebird would rely on smaller corporate engines. It was a bittersweet moment. The storm of regulations and market shifts had finally claimed the heart of the beast. The passion was still there, the style was still there, but the thundering soul of the Pontiac V8 was fading into history. Yet, even as performance numbers dwindled, the legend of the Trans Am only grew. It had become more than just a car. It was a symbol of freedom, rebellion, and an unapologetic love for the open road. It was the car that stared down the malaise era and refused to blink. It proved that even when things got tough, you didn't have to give up on excitement. You just had to be a little more clever, a little more stylish, and a little more defiant. The late 1970s Trans Am wasn't the fastest muscle car ever made, but it might just have been the one with the biggest heart. It survived the storm not by being the most powerful, but by being the most charismatic. It kept the flame of American muscle alive when it was perilously close to being extinguished. As the decade closed, nostalgia was already beginning to take hold, and people were looking back at cars like the Trans Am as the last of a dying breed. They were right. The era of the big block V8 was over, but the fire, thanks to this incredible bird, was still burning. Thank you so much for joining me on this look back at a truly pivotal moment in the Firebird's history. These cars represent the end of one chapter and the challenging beginning of another. What are your favorite memories of the late 70s Trans Ams? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more automotive history, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you on the next one. Upbeat, slightly retro synth music begins, then fades to a background hum. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into the legendary Pontiac Firebird. We've journeyed through the raw power and rebellious spirit of the 1970s. But as we cross the threshold into a new decade, the Firebird story takes a futuristic turn. The 1980s were a time of digital dreams, synthesizer music, and a bold new vision for what a car could be. And one car, one show, would launch the Firebird into a completely different stratosphere of stardom. Slight pause for dramatic effect. Yes, we're talking about Knight Rider. We simply can't discuss the Firebird's enduring legacy without paying homage to the only cat, the Knight Industries 2000. Even though our main focus has been the classic 70s era, the 1980s evolution is a crucial chapter. The world was changing, and so was the Firebird. Gone were the days of pure, unadulterated muscle car brawn being the only selling point. The 80s demanded something more. It demanded technology, intelligence, and a sleek, aerodynamic look that screamed future. Enter the third-generation Firebird, launched in 1982. This car was a radical departure. It was lower, lighter, more aerodynamic, and designed with a wedge shape that looked like it was slicing through the air even when standing still. The aggressive, almost bird-like front end of the 70s was transformed into a sharp-pointed nose with pop-up headlights. It was the perfect canvas for Hollywood's next big automotive star. When Knight Rider debuted in September 1982, it wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural phenomenon. The star wasn't just David Hasselhoff as Michael Knight. For millions of kids and adults, the real hero was his car. This modified 1982 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am wasn't just a vehicle. It was a partner, a protector, a supercomputer on wheels. Let's break down what made KITT so iconic. First, that voice. The calm, sophisticated, and slightly witty voice of William Daniels gave the car a personality. It wasn't just a machine. It was a character you could root for. KITT was loyal, intelligent, and always had a clever solution or a dry remark for Michael. This humanized the technology in a way no one had ever seen before. Then, there was the tech. Oh, the glorious 80s vision of the future tech. The most iconic feature, of course, was the red scanner light in the nose. That pulsating red light, sweeping back and forth, became an instant symbol of advanced intelligence and power. It was the car's eye, its signature, and a feature that countless Firebird owners would try to replicate on their own cars for years to come. Inside, KITT was a pilot's cockpit, not a driver's seat. Forget simple gauges and a radio. KITT had a complex dashboard filled with flashing buttons, digital displays, voice oscilloscopes, and that futuristic yoke-style steering wheel. It could analyze data, hack into computer systems, and even drive itself with auto cruise mode. For a generation growing up with the first personal computers, this was mind-blowing stuff. And let's not forget the abilities. KITT could communicate with Michael through his wristwatch, see in the dark, and analyze chemical compositions with its olfactory sensor. It was armored with a molecular bonded shell, making it virtually indestructible. It could withstand bullets, explosions, and crashes that would obliterate any normal car. But the ultimate party trick? Turbo boost. With the press of a button, KITT could launch itself over obstacles, leap across gaps, and perform incredible stunts. Every time you heard that distinctive sound effect and saw KITT flying through the air, it was pure television magic. It took the Firebird's rebellious spirit and literally made it fly. Knight Rider cemented the Firebird as more than just a muscle car. It became a symbol of heroic technology, a futuristic dream machine. While the Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am represented outlaw freedom, KITT's Trans Am represented high-tech justice. It was the cool car of the decade. Every kid wanted a kit of their own. Toy cars, model kits, and video games flew off the shelves. The show's impact on Pontiac was immense. Firebird sales, particularly for the Trans Am, soared. The car's sleek, black, high-tech image on screen translated directly into showroom appeal. People didn't just see a Pontiac. They saw a piece of KITT. They saw the potential for adventure and the promise of the future. This era proves how adaptable the Firebird's spirit truly was. It could be a raw, rumbling beast in one decade and a sophisticated, intelligent hero in the next. The core DNA of performance, style, and a touch of defiance was always there, just reinterpreted for a new generation. The Knight Rider Firebird wasn't just a prop. It was the final evolution of the car's identity in the public consciousness, securing its place in pop culture history forever. It showed that the Firebird was never just about horsepower. It was about personality. It was about being the hero's ride, whether that hero was a charismatic outlaw or a modern-day knight. The legacy of the 1970s, Firebird set the stage, but the KITT of the 1980s launched it into immortality. It truly was one night and one car that could make a difference. Thanks so much for joining me on this look back at a television icon. The Firebird's journey is a fascinating one, and its time in the Hollywood spotlight is a huge part of its story. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your favorite KITT memories in the comments below. Until next time, keep the passion for classic cars alive. Welcome back, everyone, to our deep dive into the cars that made history. Today, we're tackling a true icon, a car that didn't just exist in a decade, but came to define it. This is Chapter 18, Why the Pontiac Firebird was the undisputed king of the 1970s. So, what made the Firebird so special? To understand that, you have to understand the 70s. It was a decade of paradoxes. The free-spirited optimism of the 60s was fading, replaced by economic uncertainty, gas shortages, and a sense of disillusionment. Yet, at the same time, there was this fierce, underlying desire for personal expression, for freedom, and for a little bit of rebellion. People were looking for an escape, a symbol that said, "I'm still here, and I'm still in control." The Firebird became that symbol on four wheels. Let's start with the look. The second-generation Firebird, introduced in 1970, was a masterpiece of automotive design. It was long, low, and aggressive. While other pony cars were getting boxier, the Firebird leaned into its European-inspired, muscular curves. It looked fast even when it was parked. But the real game-changer, the element that burned itself into the collective consciousness, arrived in 1973. I'm talking, of course, about the Screaming Chicken. That massive, audacious bird graphic plastered across the hood was more than just a decal. It was a statement. In an era of beige sedans and vinyl tops, the Firebird Trans Am, with its shaker hood and bold graphics, was an act of defiance. It was loud, proud, and unapologetically cool. It told the world you weren't just driving from point A to point B. You were on an adventure. But style without substance is just a pretty shell. The 70s were a tough time for performance. The muscle car golden era of the late 60s was over, killed off by emissions regulations, insurance hikes, and the oil crisis. Horsepower numbers were plummeting across the board. While many manufacturers gave up, Pontiac fought to keep the spirit alive. The Firebird, and specifically the Trans Am, became the last bastion of American performance. Sure, the horsepower figures weren't what they used to be, but Pontiac engineers were clever. They focused on what they could control: handling and torque. The Trans Am, with its big V8 South like the 455 Super Duty, still delivered that gut punch of acceleration that drivers craved. More importantly, they fine-tuned the suspension, creating a car that could actually handle a corner. It wasn't just about straight-line speed anymore. It was about the total driving experience. The Firebird offered a connection to the road that was becoming increasingly rare. It was a driver's car in an era that was trying to create appliances. This combination of defiant style and tenacious performance perfectly captured the feeling of rebellion that simmered throughout the decade. Driving a Firebird was a rejection of the mundane. It was a choice to be different, to be bold. It was the automotive equivalent of listening to rock and roll with the windows down. And then, Hollywood stepped in and cemented the Firebird's legendary status forever. In 1977, a black and gold special edition Trans Am roared onto the silver screen in Smokey and the Bandit. The movie wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural phenomenon. Burt Reynolds, as the Bandit, with his charismatic grin and complete disregard for authority, was the hero everyone needed. And his co-star wasn't Sally Field. It was the Trans Am. The car was central to the plot, outsmarting Sheriff Buford T. Justice at every turn. It jumped, it slid, it raced, and it looked incredible doing it. The movie perfectly distilled the essence of the Firebird: freedom, fun, and a healthy dose of anti-establishment spirit. After Smokey and the Bandit, Firebird sales exploded. Dealerships couldn't keep them in stock. Everyone wanted a piece of that outlaw fantasy. The car became a rolling symbol of freedom, the ultimate getaway vehicle from the worries of everyday life. But it wasn't just about the Bandit. The Firebird also appeared on television in shows like The Rockford Files. James Garner's character, Jim Rockford, drove a gold Firebird Esprit. It wasn't the high-performance Trans Am, but it was still stylish and cool, projecting an image of laid-back confidence. This showed the Firebird's versatility. You didn't have to be a full-on outlaw to appreciate its appeal. It could be the hero's ride, the private eye's partner, or the dream car for the kid in the suburbs. It represented an attainable dream of coolness and independence. So when you put it all together, the picture becomes clear. The 1970s was a decade searching for an identity, caught between the past and an uncertain future. The Pontiac Firebird mirrored this perfectly. It carried the torch of performance from the muscle car era, but adapted it for a new reality. It offered a bold, expressive style that stood in stark contrast to the conformity of the time. It symbolized a spirit of rebellion and a deep-seated desire for personal freedom, a fantasy that was brought to life on the big screen. The Firebird wasn't just a piece of metal, rubber, and glass. It was an attitude. It was a feeling. It was the promise that even when things get tough, you can still hit the open road. Put your foot down and feel untamed and alive. That's why more than any other car, the Firebird truly defined the 1970s. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. It's always a blast talking about these incredible machines. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next chapter. We've got plenty more automotive history to uncover. Until next time, keep the passion alive. Welcome back to our journey through automotive history. Today, we arrive at a chapter that's tinged with sadness and nostalgia, the fall and farewell of a true American icon. We're talking about the final days of the Pontiac Firebird. For decades, the Firebird wasn't just a car. It was a symbol. It represented the roar of freedom on the open road, the pinnacle of muscle car dreams, and for many, the very essence of youthful rebellion. From the screaming chicken on the hood to its thundering V8 heart, the Firebird was a cultural touchstone, a star of both the street and the silver screen. It was the car you dreamed of owning, the one that made your heart beat a little faster every time one rumbled past. But as the 20th century drew to a close, the automotive landscape was shifting dramatically. The market began to change. Tastes evolved, and the golden age of the American muscle car seemed to be fading in the rearview mirror. For the Pontiac brand, this period was fraught with challenges. Once a beacon of performance and style within the General Motors family, Pontiac found itself struggling to maintain its identity in a sea of corporate restructuring and changing consumer priorities. The brand that gave us the GTO, the Bonneville, and of course the Firebird was facing an uphill battle. Sales figures across the industry were telling a new story, one that favored practicality, fuel efficiency, and SUVs over the raw, untamed power that Pontiac had championed for so long. The pressures were immense, and tough decisions were being made in boardrooms that would have ripple effects for generations of car lovers. It was within this climate of uncertainty that the fate of the fourth-generation Firebird hung in the balance. Despite being a formidable machine, arguably one of the most capable Firebirds ever built, it was swimming against a powerful current. The platform it shared with its sibling, the Chevrolet Camaro, was aging, and the investment required for a complete redesign was deemed too high a risk in a shrinking market segment. The writing, unfortunately, was on the wall. And so, in 2002, the news that fans had dreaded finally became a reality. General Motors announced that the Firebird, along with the Camaro, would be discontinued. There was no grand, triumphant final lap. There wasn't a massive celebration to honor its storied legacy. Instead, it felt like a quiet, somber farewell. The last Firebird rolled off the assembly line not with a bang, but with a whisper, marking the end of a 35-year dynasty. For the countless fans and owners, the news was gut-wrenching. It felt like more than just the end of a production line. It felt like the end of an era. This was the car that had defined high school parking lots, starred in blockbuster movies, and served as the poster on countless bedroom walls. It symbolized speed, freedom, and a certain unapologetic American swagger. To see it simply fade away was a bitter pill to swallow. Online forums and car clubs buzzed with a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. People shared stories of their first Firebird, the races they'd won, the cross-country trips they'd taken, the proms they'd attended. Each story was a testament to the car's impact, a personal memory woven into the larger tapestry of the Firebird's legacy. It was a collective mourning for a machine that was so much more than just metal, glass, and rubber. It was a member of the family. The final models, particularly the 35th Anniversary Collector's Edition Trans Am, became instant collectibles. They were the last of their kind, a final powerful statement from a legendary nameplate. Decked out in distinctive yellow paint with bold graphics, these cars were a fitting tribute, a final roar from the Phoenix before it went silent. Owning one wasn't just about having a fast car. It was about holding on to a piece of history, preserving the spirit of an icon. Looking back, the discontinuation of the Firebird was a major sign of the troubles that lay ahead for Pontiac. The brand had lost one of its brightest stars, one of its core pillars of identity. Without the Firebird to carry the torch of high performance, Pontiac struggled to find its footing. The brand tried to reinvent itself with other models, but for many, the soul of Pontiac had left with the Firebird. Just a few years later, in the midst of a massive corporate restructuring, the entire Pontiac division would be shuttered, bringing an 84-year history to an unceremonious close. The fall of Pontiac and the farewell to the Firebird serve as a poignant reminder of how quickly things can change. It's a story of market forces, corporate decisions, and the inevitable passage of time. But it's also a story of enduring passion. Because even though you can't buy a new Firebird today, its spirit is more alive than ever. You see it at every car show, in the gleaming paint and polished chrome of meticulously restored classics. You hear it in the rumble of a modified V8 echoing through a summer night. You feel it in the stories shared between generations of enthusiasts, passing down the legend of the screaming chicken. The Firebird may have been discontinued, but it was never forgotten. It remains a cherished icon, a symbol of a time when cars had bold personalities and unapologetic power. It represents a dream of speed and freedom that still resonates with us today. The final chapter of the Firebird's production may have been a quiet farewell, but its legacy roars on, louder than ever, in the hearts of everyone who ever turned the key and felt that Phoenix come to life. It's a bittersweet ending to a legendary story, but a story that is far from over. Thank you so much for joining us on this nostalgic look back at the final days of the Pontiac Firebird. It's a topic close to our hearts, and we hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane. If you have your own Firebird story, we'd absolutely love to read it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more automotive stories, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Until next time, keep the passion alive. And so, we arrive at the final chapter of our story, not with an ending, but with a new beginning. Chapter 20, The Eternal Phoenix. The year was 2010. The last Pontiac rolled off the assembly line, and with it the production of the Firebird officially ceased. The factories went silent, the roar of the V8 South faded from the production floor, and an era came to a quiet, somber close. For many, it felt like the end of a dream. The bird that had soared so high for over 4 decades had seemingly fallen from the sky, but was it truly the end? Like its mythical namesake, the Firebird was never destined for a true demise. It was born from fire, a symbol of rebirth and resilience. And just like the phoenix, it would rise again, not from ashes, but from the passion and dedication of those who loved it. The story of the Firebird didn't conclude on an assembly line. It simply shifted from the hands of its creators to the hearts of its keepers. Think about it. The Firebird has transcended its physical form as just a car. It's become a cultural icon, a rolling piece of art, a time capsule of American history. It lives on, stronger and more vibrant than ever in countless ways. It lives in the memories of a generation. The memory of that first car, the one that meant freedom and adventure. The memory of cruising down Main Street on a warm summer night, windows down, music blaring, with the screaming chicken on the hood leading the way. It's the memory of a father teaching his son how to turn a wrench, their hands greasy from working on that Trans Am in the garage. These aren't just recollections. They are foundational moments, chapters in personal histories where the Firebird played a starring role. They are stories told and retold, passed down, keeping the spirit alive with every nostalgic smile. The Firebird lives in the gleaming collections of dedicated enthusiasts. Step into any one of their garages, and you'll see it. Rows of perfectly preserved machines, each one a testament to meticulous care and unwavering devotion. These collectors aren't just owners, they are curators of a legacy. They spend countless hours and resources hunting for original parts, restoring paint to its factory shine and ensuring every mechanical component is in perfect working order. They are the guardians of the flame, protecting these automotive treasures for future generations to admire and appreciate. Each polished chrome bumper and flawless decal is a love letter to the brand. It lives on loud and proud at car shows across the country and around the world. On any given weekend, you'll find them. A gathering of the flock. First-generation classics parked next to the sleek lines of the final models. The deep rumble of a 400 cubic inch V8 echoes alongside the throaty growl of an LA's one. Here, the Firebird is not a relic. It's a celebrity. Owners share stories, swap tips, and admire each other's rides. Strangers become friends, bonded by a shared passion. Young kids stare in awe, their eyes wide with wonder at the bold designs and powerful presence. It's here, in these fields and parking lots, that the Firebird community thrives, a vibrant and welcoming family united by the bird. And perhaps most importantly, the Firebird lives in our dreams. The dream of the open road, of endless highways stretching toward the horizon. It's the dream of leaving the mundane behind, of feeling the raw power of American muscle at your command. It's the fantasy of being the hero in your own movie, with the Firebird as your trusty steed. Whether it's the black and gold allure of the Bandit or the futuristic flash of Keat, the Firebird has fueled our imaginations for decades. It represents a spirit of rebellion, of individuality, and of the relentless pursuit of freedom. It's the car we drew in our notebooks as kids, and the one we still search for online, just to look, just to dream. The production may have stopped, but the pulse of the Firebird beats on. It beats in the turn of a key, in the flicker of gauges coming to life. It roars to life with every rumbling engine that fires up, a sound that sends a shiver down the spine and a smile to the face. Each time one of these magnificent machines thunders down the street, it's a declaration that the legend is far from over. It's the phoenix, rising again and again, its cry echoing in the powerful symphony of its engine. The Firebird never truly died. It simply transformed. It became more than just metal, rubber, and glass. It became a story, a memory, a dream. It is an eternal flame passed from one enthusiast to another, burning brightly in the soul of American car culture. As long as there are open roads to be driven, stories to be told, and dreamers to dream, the Firebird will continue to soar. The eternal phoenix. Long may it fly. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of the Pontiac Firebird. It's been a privilege to share these stories with you. If you enjoyed this series, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. We'll see you on the next ride.